Hey everybody, welcome back to the Let's Talk Q&A show. This is the weekly show where I answer all of your burning questions. And I don't like to waste any time up top. I like to dive right into the questions since this is your guys' show. So we're going to start it off right away with our first question this week from our channel director, Mr. Smelly Potato. And he said, name 5 movies that you think should have not won the Oscar for Best Picture. And he also said, what are your top 5 and bottom 5 movies of 2024? So the first question, name 5 movies that I don't think should have won an Oscar. I made a list for this. And the first one is usually at the top of most people's worst movies to win Best Picture, 2005's Crash. And that's a movie that I've never really loved. I remember why it won Best Picture, you know, all these coincidences trying to really show that people do care about each other. Underneath the surface, there is good in people, but it felt a little too on the nose. It felt a little coincidental. Like, I mean, all these people just happen to cross paths. You know, really fortunate, like the one cop played by Matt Dillon happened to find the other girl, like all that stuff. It's just too convenient. And I just think that movie was a little bit too overrated. I mean, Brokeback Mountain that came out that year, a lot of people expected that to win Best Picture. That is a much better movie than the movie Crash. Driving Miss Daisy from 1989. This is another one that's really famous. You know, what really sucks about this movie, because it's a fine movie, is that that's the same year that Do the Right Thing came out, and that only received an Oscar nomination for its screenplay. And Do the Right Thing is easily one of the best movies to come out that year. There's so many great movies that came out in 1989. And the only time people ever bring up Driving Miss Daisy is in circumstances like this when we're talking about movies that won Best Picture that really shouldn't have. And, you know, it's just a problem with the Academy. Driving Miss Daisy, it's an okay movie, but, you know, in movies like Do the Right Thing, all-time classics, important films, to not even get nominated in the category, that is a huge problem. This is one from 1941. I don't know how many people have even heard of this movie. How Green Was My Valley. In 1941, that won Best Picture over the greatest film of all time in a lot of people's eyes, Citizen Kane, and it also won over The Maltese Falcon, one of the greatest noir films of all time. So those two films lost out to How Green Was My Valley. That's absolutely insane to me. One that we've talked about in the past here is The King's Speech in 2010, winning over The Social Network. Again, The King's Speech, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with The King's Speech, but is that the movie that most people remember from 2010? I'd argue that not only The Social Network, but Inception are 2 movies from 2010 that people still bring up to this very day. And other than some extreme cinephiles, you know, a little bit of snooty people, they're going to bring up The King's Speech. And The King's Speech, again, it's fine. I don't want to knock it too much, but I don't think about The King's Speech. And then the last really big one is Shakespeare in Love in 1998 over Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan. How this movie, Shakespeare in Love is another one that it's okay. A lot of people will say that the reason why that even won Best Picture is because of Harvey Weinstein, you know, out there kissing babies and just doing the whole political thing. That's the biggest thing with the Academy Awards and any award show in Hollywood is it's still politics, baby. Unfortunately, you know, if you get out there, you go to the parties, you mingle with the other people, they might give you their vote for Best Picture. And apparently Harvey Weinstein was really good at this, and he ended up having one of his films that he produced win Best Picture over a classic and all-timer, Saving Private Ryan. For that movie not to win Best Picture that year and have a movie like Shakespeare in Love, another movie nobody ever talks about, it's just insane. And another one that's a little less offensive, I know this isn't more than 5, but this always bothers me too, is that Goodfellas didn't win Best Picture in 1990. They gave it to Dances with Wolves, another just okay movie that, you know, people still kind of talk about Dances with Wolves, but I mean, Goodfellas, one of the greatest movies ever. That absolutely should have won Best Picture in 1990. So that stuff does kind of drive me a little bit insane. And now on to your other question, like what's my best and worst of 2024? Now, for my best, I do usually do a top 10 list, either at the end of December or early January, so you'll get a full breakdown. And I haven't seen all the movies yet that I still think that could make my list for 2024, like Nosferatu or The Brutalist. The Brutalist I might not see until early January, so that might not even end up on my top 10 list just because I don't know when it's going to come out over here. But for the most part, I've seen everything I want to see. So I have a few more movies that I have to see that could still end up making the list. But I'll just give you my top 5 really quick. And then, you know, we'll have a full top 10 video later this year or early 2025. But as of right now, at number 5, I got Yorgos Lanthimos' Kind of Kindness, which is by far my favorite Yorgos Lanthimos film. I like this more than last year's Poor Things. I thought Emma Stone gave a better performance in this movie. Jesse Plemons is great. Willem Dafoe is great. Now, this is an anthology film. I'm just really surprised this flew under a lot of people's radar. I mean, I understand that it's maybe not like the period pieces of his last 2 films and like Poor Things and The Favorite, where, you know, we have the great costume design and all that stuff. You know, this takes place in the modern time, so You know, all the set design and everything, like, it feels like real world houses, real world locations. You know, they're at one point in a police station, the second part of Kinds of Kindness. I can understand why people might not love that movie, but I'm telling you, give this one a shot. Check it out on Hulu right now. At number 4, I got The Substance. This is a movie that I just recently checked out. I wasn't actually going to check it out until January. I was like, oh, I'll wait till January. I mean, I've heard all these good things. There's no way it's like that good that it's going to end up in my top 10. Sure enough, this movie is fantastic. The message of this movie about how Hollywood just casts out women after, you know, they start to get old, that stuff rings so true. Then on top of that, it is a perfect body horror film, you know, in the same vein as David Cronenberg films, but a little bit different. You know, the world itself is very clean, very shiny looking, actually looks beautiful, but, you know, that's trying to show you that in Hollywood, underneath the surface, it's a little bit more dirtier and disgusting than you think. Again, the messaging of this movie matching it up with the beautiful production design, and then, of course, the great practical effects, and then your lead actresses do a fantastic job. Even Dennis Quaid, who hasn't given a great performance in a long time, he's good in this movie. Didn't see Reagan this year, though, so he was in that. At number 3, I got Long Legs by Oz Perkins. When I first saw this movie, I thought it was really good. I was like, oh, that's a great movie. Then when I finally rewatched it at home, it really cemented how good this movie was for me. Like, sometimes you got to give a movie a second chance to see if it can rise up your list. There's a couple other movies I want to see one more time, like Honora, see if maybe that goes up my list a little bit more. I thought Honora was great, but, you know, I don't have it in my top 10 yet. We'll have to wait and see. I'm going to check it out one more time before I make my final list. But this movie, it's fantastic. Nicolas Cage gives a great performance in it. You know, they save him. They don't really overuse him, but when they do use him, man, he is scary as hell. This movie, again, great production design. I love the changing aspect ratios of it. This is just a movie that just works very well for me. It might not be the scariest movie ever, like people were hyping this up to be when it was first coming out, but no, it's still a fantastic film with a great performances in there, and it's one that I feel like is going to be endlessly rewatchable. You're going to be asking so much questions about this. The third act is great. Definitely check out Long Legs. At number 2, I got Challengers, directed by Luca Guadagnino. This one stars Zendaya. When this movie came out, you know, I've never really been the biggest Luca Guadagnino fan. He also had another movie come out, Queer, that I haven't seen yet, that stars Daniel Craig. Heard mixed things on the film. I'll definitely check it out. Daniel Craig is getting like Academy Award buzz. I'll check that out before the year's over or early next year to see how that is. But this movie, it's not only a great sports film, it also has a fantastic score in there done by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. That score just fits the movie perfectly, moves along at a quick pace. The phenomenal sports stuff, telling the story non-linearly. But then all the manipulation stuff with Zendaya in this movie works so well. How, unfortunately, she couldn't live out her dream, so she's living out her dream through her now husband. And, I mean, I'm not going to spoil too much more than that, because I don't know how many people have seen Challengers. You can check this one out right now for free on Amazon Prime, if you have Amazon Prime, and I can definitely recommend that. And right now, my number 1 movie of 2024 is Saturday Night, directed by Jason Reitman. Didn't expect this to be my number 1 movie of the year. This movie made no money at the box office. Not many people have seen it, and it's just about the 90 minutes leading up to the first episode of Saturday Night Live. You know, you get some very familiar faces in there. All the actors do a great job playing real people like Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, Lorne Michaels. I just thought it was done so well. Now, this is kind of a movie that speaks very much to me. I love behind-the-scenes stuff. A couple of years ago, my favorite film was Babylon, kind of in the similar vein. But this movie, I just love the performances in it. You know, I don't know how necessarily accurate this stuff is, but as a film, watching it in a bubble, I thought it was fantastic. And right now, that is my favorite film of 2024. Now, it was kind of hard to come up with a worst. And right now, the only ones that I would say are the worst of 2024 that I saw were Night Swim, The Strangers Part 1, and the only one that might surprise you guys is Immaculate, starring Sydney Sweeney. I really did not like that movie. I know people love that movie. I thought the third act, I was impressed with how they wrapped this movie up. I thought they really went for it at the end. I thought that was by far the best part. But everything before that, it just did not work for me. I found the movie to be a sludge to get through. Really, really boring. It just was not my kind of movie, and that really bothered me. I thought that The First Omen, which I watched on the same day, I did kind of a back-to-back thing there, which, you know, similar stories, I guess. I thought The First Omen was a much better movie than Immaculate. Sydney Sweeney's great. It's just the movie itself didn't work for me. But that was a great question, Mr. Smelly Potato. Thank you so much, buddy. Next question is from Kevin Kruger, and he said, "What are some things that that the younger generation has said to you recently that made you feel old?" Recently, my coworkers who are much younger than me told me that they have never even heard of Christmas Vacation, Christmas Story, or It's a Wonderful Life. That's absolutely insane that they haven't actually heard of those movies. I mean, which is weird because I was born in 1992. Christmas Vacation came out couple years before I was born, so that kind of makes sense. But It's a Wonderful Life, like that's a cornerstone movie for everyone, I feel like, especially if you celebrate Christmas. How do you not know about It's a Wonderful Life? Just by watching TV shows, you should know about it. Like, that's one of those movies that are one of the greatest films in cinema. Forget it being just a great Christmas movie. It's just a great movie. I'm very surprised that they haven't heard of It's a Wonderful Life. I'm sure some of my younger coworkers, because I do have coworkers that range from like the age of 18 to like age 85 at my job. So it's all over the place. But one thing that blew my mind pretty damn recently is I was talking about the movie Free Willy. That was a childhood favorite of mine growing up. And I saw recently a picture online of the guy who played Jesse in that movie. He was a kid back then, and I saw what he looked like now, and I was like, holy shit, it made me feel old. Because I was like, oh my god, because, you know, we look at those guys, you never hear from them again. Like, he was in the other two Free Willy movies, which nowhere near as good as the first one. But I was just a big Free Willy kid growing up. So I always knew who that was. It's kind of why Lori Petty was one of my first crushes. And what's his name? The guy from Heat's in there as well. And I always liked the movie. So I saw an older version of the guy who plays Jesse, and I was like, holy shit. So I wanted to go tell people, like, did you see what Jesse looked like from Free Willy? And then nobody at my job had seen Free Willy except for, like, some of the older people. But all the younger kids like, what's Free Willy? And I was like, I can't believe it. Like, I always just felt like Free Willy has always been one of those movies that I just felt like everyone had seen because it was just so popular back in the day. But I got to remember that was probably just popular for a certain generation. And it's probably not, like, you know, a beloved classic like I kind of look at it as. I mean, we haven't even gotten Free Willy back on Blu-ray. It's out of print because I guess not many people care about Free Willy. But I really cared about Free Willy growing up. So that, you know, that hurt me. That made me really feel like an old bastard. And then one that I always have to bring this one up because it blows my mind is I remember I was working with a girl and she was going to see Darius Ruckert. And Darius Ruckert's a huge country guy. And I was like, oh, cool, you're going to see Hootie. Because Darius Ruckert's the lead singer of Hootie and the Blowfish. So, of course, I know Hootie and the Blowfish. They had so many hits in the 1990s. And she's like, who? I was like, Hootie. He's Hootie from Hootie and the Blowfish. Before he was Darius Ruckert, he was Hootie. She's like, never heard of Hootie and the Blowfish. And I was like, oh, my God. I'm like, how can you be a fan of Darius Ruckert but not know who Hootie from Hootie and the Blowfish is? So, you know, I've kind of experienced this as well, Kevin. But that's a great question, buddy. Thank you so much. Another one that kind of ties into the same thing is from Uncle Charlie. And Uncle Charlie said, what's the worst job you've ever had? The last job I had, I absolutely hated for about the last 4 or 5 years of it. Yet I somehow, for some reason, stayed there despite myself becoming increasingly more unhappy and bitter with how the job was going. Felt so much better when I finally left that job in April of this year. Definitely enjoying what I do now much, much, much more, much happier. But was that the worst job I ever had? Like, I was able to make some good money at that job. It's just for my mental health and just the way they, in my opinion, abused people. I just cannot look at that job the same. I'm not going to tell you what that job is, but let's just say it's not a good one. But the worst job I ever had, I only worked there for a couple days. It was a seasonal job. You know, it's not really in business anymore, but I worked at Toys R Us during a Christmas season in 2012. I worked there for 3 days. I mean, I guess that's why they went out of business. I have never seen a company like more unorganized. Like, none of us like were trained at all, and we're just like, okay, just go out there and wing it. Now it's overnights. It was just a terrible, terrible, terrible situation. I do not understand like how you can manage a business like that. And again, they did go out of business a couple years after that, so I guess the writing was on the wall. But I worked at a Target during the Christmas season the year before. You know, back in the day, I needed a little bit of money for Christmas. You know, my main job wasn't paying that much, so, you know, you get like a part-time job, a seasonal job, and that's kind of what I was doing. And Target, much, much more organized than Toys R Us, which they were right across the street from each other. Should have gone back to Target that year, but, you know, I felt like, hey, Toys R Us, I grew up with them. The Giraffe, he's a great guy. So, you know, that's a great question as well, buddy. Thank you so much. And the next question is on Blu-ray Collector 18-year-old underrated kids movie that I have seen and forgotten gem that you recommend. So the forgotten gem, I actually brought it over here because I do have the Blu-ray, and that is Waiting, starring Ryan Reynolds, Anna Faris, Justin Long, Andy Milonakis when he was around, and he was a big deal at the time. Same thing with Dane Cook, very much of the mid-2000s famous people. So I was so excited to see this movie, and this is a laugh-out-loud riot. This is one of my favorite comedies from the 2000s, and if you ever worked in the restaurant industry, I mean, this will ring even truer for you. It's pretty accurate, obviously very over-exaggerated, but some of the stuff is pretty damn accurate, like right down to the stuff talking about, you know, staying at a job, you know, rings very true for me, staying at a job you don't love, but, you know, the safety of it, you know, the financial security of it, the security of having a job, medical benefits, you know, all that stuff keeps you at a job that you absolutely hate. Believe me, I've been there. And this movie is talking about that in this little comedy where these guys are showing each other their ball sacks and playing a game with it. Yeah, go figure. It's kind of a two-hander there. Just really thought that this movie is extremely underrated. Now, as far as a kid's movie that I think is very underrated, Osmosis Jones. I mean, I saw this movie in the theaters, and then as I was growing up, going through school, like, they would show this movie all the time in science class, because I guess it's kind of accurate, talking about the insides of our bodies. It stars Chris Rock as Osmosis Jones. Well, he's a guy fighting crime inside of Bill Murray's body, which is a disaster zone. Bill Murray, he plays the guy on the outside, kind of raising his daughter. He's funny as well, but I always thought this movie was extremely underrated. I'm thinking about it now. I thought this movie came out in the early 2000s, but this was definitely in the late 90s, because I remember specifically in one day watching Osmosis Jones and Godzilla in 1998, and that had just come out on VHS. So this movie might be 1999 off the top of my head. I don't know, but check out Osmosis Jones. It's fantastic. Next question is from William Driver, and he said, top 5 movies that you're still surprised have not come to 4K yet. Mine are Dancing with Wolves, 1990, the Lethal Weapon franchise, just because of the amount of money it took in the 80s, Ben-Hur, 1959, Gravity, 2013, it did win 7 Oscars, and finally, most of all, Jim Carrey's back catalog. They might not be the most favorite movies, but I thought they would have come to 4K by now. So I actually made a list for this, and some of this is actually on your list. And we're not looking at the movies that I personally want to come to 4K Blu-ray that haven't come to 4K Blu-ray. The question is, like, movies that I'm surprised haven't come to 4K Blu-ray yet. Now, I left Lethal Weapon off because it's pretty much confirmed that it's going to come sometime this year. That fake list that we saw a couple weeks ago, you know, for the most part, they've kind of been right. Like, Amadeus is coming on February 25th. That's been confirmed now. That was on that list. So everything at the beginning, Constantine, Amadeus, you know, they've been right about that list. So it's very, very possible that we're going to be getting Lethal Weapon sometime early in 2025. So I left that off my list. But the big one, and I always say it, and I know why we haven't gotten it yet. 20th Century Fox used to own it, and then, of course, Disney ended up with the rights to it. But Fight Club. David Fincher's Fight Club. Now, I would say that 7 is my favorite David Fincher movie. That's getting a 4K Blu-ray release in January. But Fight Club is absolutely David Fincher's most popular movie. When I think of the year 1999, which is argued to be the best year in cinema, that's the same year we got The Matrix. When I think of The Matrix, I would say that's probably the most popular film of 1999, a cornerstone of 1999. If you have to see one movie from that year that just changed the game for cinema, you go with The Matrix. But right next to it is David Fincher's Fight Club, starring Edward Norton and Brad Pitt. I mean, that movie, it has so many topics that it's trying to discuss, whether it be with consumerism, you know, toxic masculinity. It's a very important movie, and of course, David Fincher directed it, so it's a beautiful looking movie. It's a well-structured movie. It's just a fantastic film overall. How that movie hasn't come to 4K blows my mind. And then I agree with you, the Jim Carrey movies, but I'm going to go strictly with Jim Carrey 1994. You could even put this in a box set called the Jim Carrey 1994 collection, because all 3 of these movies were #1 at the box office. All 3 of these are huge hits, and you can argue to this very day, those are still Jim Carrey's best movies. You got... In February, you got Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. In the summertime, we got The Mask. And then in December, we wrap the year up with Dumb and Dumber. All 3 are masterpieces, and all 3 of those deserve to come to 4K Blu-ray. Now, I use the word masterpiece lightly. I think they are, but I know, you know, there's people out there who don't even like Jim Carrey. Big is a big one for me. I thought we were going to actually get this in 2023, celebrating its 35th anniversary, because it came out in 1988. I mean, I thought Big was a big deal. Like, this is one of the movies I grew up with. It was a huge movie for my mother. Tom Hanks stars in it. Penny Marshall directed this one. Again, like, kind of Hollywood royalty with her and her brother and, like, her whole family. And then, of course, like, A League of Their Own came out a few years later. That's gotten 2 4K Blu-ray releases. But yet, somehow, we haven't gotten Big. And I really don't understand how we haven't gotten Big. That was an extremely popular film, at least from what I understand. Another popular film from the 1990s, and it has a huge cult following, Friday. This is one that's also kind of rumored to be coming this year. I doubt we'll get next Friday and Friday after next. Friday after next never even came to Blu-ray, which blows my fucking mind, because that's an alternate Christmas movie that people should check out. But the original Friday movie, that's a classic. I have that movie poster on my wall, and yet for some reason, that classic comedy from the 1990s has not come to 4K yet. And then the last one, because this is just really surprising, because we've gotten a lot of Steven Spielberg movies on 4K Blu-ray, but Minority Report, that movie was huge when it came out. I feel like not a lot of people talk about it now, but at the time, you really can't sell short how good Minority Report was as a film. and then just how popular it was. I'm not entirely sure how that hasn't come to 4K Blu-ray yet. We got Duel before we got Minority Report. Now, I get it. Duel has a cult following as well. Minority Report was a big hit. So that was a great question, William. Thank you so much, buddy. And the next one's from Sprazy110. He said, I always enjoy seeing as a guest on other YouTubers' live streams. Do you ever get nervous doing that? I don't really get nervous doing live streams. I actually really enjoy doing them, especially doing them with like Frank and the boys like every Tuesday. That's one of the things I look forward to most each week. Now, I don't really like hosting them myself personally, and I'll give you a good reason why. It's kind of like how the same reason like with filming this show, you're always worried about things going wrong, like technically. Like I'm worried about like the audio going out, the picture quality, the lighting and everything. So when I'm hosting a live stream, like I'm always worried about things going wrong. But when I just get to talk, I'm not worried at all. I love doing that kind of stuff. I've never been somebody who's like afraid to like talk to a camera or even talk in front of a crowd. I've actually always kind of really enjoyed that. For some reason, like I'll enjoy that aspect of being the center of attention. But if you sing happy birthday to me at a restaurant, I absolutely hate that. I'm going to leave and I'm never going to speak to you again if you do that one. That's the center of attention I don't like. But if like people are listening to me, it kind of does stroke my ego a little bit. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you guys. So, you know, I really enjoy doing those live streams and talking to other people. I have a great time with them. It doesn't make me nervous. I just have an absolute blast doing them. That's a great question, Sprazy. Thanks, buddy. And the next question, also from Mr. Smelly Potato, is what movie from this year captured a specific time period the best? And I'm actually going to go with Maxine on this one. And I had a good conversation with Rico Gomez, who you guys always probably see in the comment section. And I know he disagrees with me on this, but I really felt like the movie Maxine captured the 1980s perfectly. Now, I never grew up in the 1980s, so to say that I was there, it would be impossible. But for watching 1980s movies, and I thought Maxine captured two movies very well, like in their tone and how Los Angeles looked at the time, at least from what I understand. And that's American Gigolo and Body Double. Both movies take place in Los Angeles in the early 1980s, kind of around the time where Maxine takes place. And you can clearly see the inspiration of those two movies on Maxine, especially Body Double. And I really felt like they were kind of going for that look and tone, and I thought that they nailed it. I thought Ty West did a great job with this. All three movies in that Ty West trilogy, X, Pearl, and Maxine, are paying homage to other great horror films. And I think they did a great job with all three of them, and Maxine definitely captured the 1980s perfectly. I'm a huge 1980s fan, despite the fact, again, I never lived in the 1980s. I guess I glorify a decade that I wasn't there for, but it just seems like it would have been a great time. I love the neon colors, the music, the movies. It works for me as a fan, so of course I was excited to see Maxine, and I thought they nailed it. I thought they did a great job with it. Maxine has a chance to make my top 10 of the year. I really came out of the theaters high on Maxine, and it's kind of tapered off a little bit. I expected that to make my top 10 of the year, and right now, kind of floating near the bottom, and I still got some movies to see. But either way, Maxine is great. That's a great question as well. I really appreciate that, Mr. Smelly Potato. And the next question is from Mr. Wolf Viking. He says, I already have my question for next week. What is your top 10 Kevin Costner movies? Made a list for this, and we'll go from the bottom and work our way up. At number 10, I got Man of Steel. He plays Mr. Kent, Father Kent, in this movie. He's married to Diane Lane. I thought he did a great job. Much better than the original down to the original Superman movie. You know, this one feels like a more realistic guy, and I thought Kevin Costner did a great job in this movie. He's fantastic as Mr. Kent. His death obviously really hurts in that movie, and that's just because Kevin Costner's a good actor. Number 9, people are going to definitely say this is a little low, but I'm just not the biggest fan of this movie. You heard me already talk about it. 1990s Dances with Wolves, but I have to acknowledge how good Kevin Costner is, not only in this movie, but he also directed the film. He won Best Director, the movie won Best Picture, so, you know, you got to give credit where credit is due, and absolutely he deserves it for Dances with Wolves. Number 8, Molly's Game. A lot of people might not remember this movie. It's directed by Aaron Sorkin. It stars Jessica Chastain. It's basically about poker, this movie. One of the characters in this movie, actually played by Michael Cera, is supposed to be Tobey Maguire. You know, it's kind of about like an underground gambling. It's about these underground gambling games, really high rollers out there. Jessica Chastain has all this potential to do whatever she wants, but instead she's running these card games. There's a scene late in the movie where Kevin Costner is sitting there talking to Molly from Molly's Game, his daughter, and they just have a great scene on the bench. That one scene alone, it's a capital A acting, and you have to check that out just for that scene. The movie itself, directed by Aaron Sorkin, it's a little bit uneven, but Aaron Sorkin knows how to write dialogue, so it's at least watchable and entertaining as hell. At number 7, I got Silverado. At number 7, I got Silverado, directed by Lauren Kasdan, wrote The Big Chill, and then, of course, he cast Kevin Costner in that movie, and he's still in, like, the credits, but he was actually the guy who ends up dying in that movie, who ends up killing himself, Alex. He's a big part of the movie. He's just not in the movie. They decided it just didn't work seeing him in the movie in flashbacks, but he's a huge part of the movie. His character is the centerpiece to get everybody there. But because he, was cut from the movie, Lawrence Kasdan made it up to him and put him in Silverado, where he kind of plays this, like, lovable idiot. He's great in the movie. He's really funny. You don't really see Kevin Costner play this that much. Usually, right after this, he kind of transitioned into, being that stoic Kevin Costner that we all know. At number 6, Perfect World. I believe this came out in 1993. It is directed by Clint Eastwood. Kevin Costner plays an escaped criminal who ends up taking a kid with him on the run, and it's just a basic cat and mouse game. We end up learning that Kevin Costner, not really that bad of a guy. I love the accent he's doing in this movie as well. He's very believable. He's pretty good with accents, as we'll talk about in the later movie. At number 5, I got The Untouchables, directed by Brian De Palma. Let's do some good. He really plays this clean cut, never gonna break any rules cop in this movie, teaming him up with Sean Connery, who was just having a resurgence in the late 1980s and 1990s. He's great in this movie. He's just a beat cop. The two of them team up, and they are going to take down Robert De Niro's Al Capone. Brian De Palma knows how to make a good movie. It's not necessarily my favorite Brian De Palma movie, but man, The Untouchables, it's still fantastic. To say it's not my favorite Brian De Palma movie, it's still a 9 out of 10 film. It's just that good. Number 4, JFK, directed by Oliver Stone. This movie is an ensemble cast, but Kevin Costner, he is the star of this film. He's the guy who's basically interacting with everybody else in this movie, and he does a great job. Again, doing a great New Orleans accent in this movie. Maybe not as good as John Candy, who I still can't believe that was him doing that accent. I thought it was crazy, but it turns out very accurate. Number 3, Bull Durham. One thing about Kevin Costner, he's known for his baseball movies, and 2 out of my top 3 favorite movies from him are baseball movies. And Bull Durham, oh my god, this has a, the Criterion release gets knocked for this, but still, it's the best way to watch Bull Durham. It's a fantastic movie about this minor league baseball team. And, Kevin Costner plays the catcher. He's the old guy on the team. Why is he still on the team at his age? He ends up hooking up with, Susan Sarandon, who apparently does this with a lot of the guys on the baseball team. She's also hooking up with Tim Robbins, causes some friction between the two of them. Tim Robbins actually was with Susan Sarandon for a long time. They even have kids together. I'm curious if they met on this film, but still. Check out Bull Durham. I love that movie. At number 2, I got No Way Out, one of the best thrillers of the 1980s, starring not just him, but Sean Young and Gene Hackman. Will Poehler's in this movie as well, giving one of his best performances. Another just cat and mouse game. I actually reviewed the Kino Lorber 4K Blu-ray earlier this year. It's just one of those movies I always run back to. It keeps you at the edge of your seat. It's nothing more than just a great political thriller with a great twist ending that I'm not going to spoil for you guys here, but you have to check it out. Kevin Costner gives one of his best performances, obviously, in this one. And then, obviously, at number 1, you gotta have Field of Dreams. It's so good. It'll leave you crying at the very end. Hey, Dad, you want to have a catch? It works every single time. And Kevin Costner, not only does he give his greatest performance in this movie, but James Earl Jones is great. There are just so many magical moments in this movie, and it's a very magical film. Also has a great 4K Blu-ray as well. Definitely check out Field of Dreams. That was a great question, buddy. I really do appreciate that, Mr. Wolf Viking. Thank you so much, buddy. And the next question is from Mr. Mice, and then it kind of cut off. What are some of your classic, critically popular, award-winning films, etc., that you don't agree with and consider overrated? I'll go first. The Godfather. Yep, I said it. Well, I don't think The Godfather is overrated. I actually think that The Godfather Part 1 and Part 2 are 2 of the greatest films ever made, and has one of the greatest, actually does have the greatest character arc in all time in Al Pacino's Michael Corleone. So, I don't think those movies are overrated. But one movie I think is overrated, and I guess this movie, overrated's tough, because I'm not the biggest fan of Jaws, but I don't think that movie's overrated. It's just not one of my personal favorite movies, is Jaws. But people put that, as the greatest film ever made, including my co-host of the Let's Talk podcast, David, a.k.a. Shamrock Balls, and he's very well aware of this. Always hurts me to say it, but I don't like lying, so I couldn't, pretend to like a movie I don't really necessarily love, and Jaws has always been that movie. I've never been the world's biggest Jaws fan. I go back to it. I can appreciate it for everything that it does. It's definitely one of Steven Spielberg's best movies. Well directed, well acted by everybody in there. I can understand why it's so beloved. It just never clicked 110% with me. And that actually hurts. I want to love Jaws. I don't like telling people who love Jaws, not one of my favorite movies, because then we got to have the conversation, well, why? And then I got to explain it. So it kind of becomes a whole thing. The other big franchise that everybody has loved, and I've never really enjoyed this franchise, it includes this year, and that's George Miller's Mad Max franchise. They're just really very straightforward action films, and I think the best one is actually the original Mad Max, followed by Road Warrior. Thunderdome's okay, but the last two, like Furiosa and then, Mad Max Fury Road, I really didn't like Fury Road. I remember I watched that movie 2 days in a row and just going, why isn't this movie clicking for me? I mean, like, it looks beautiful. It checks a lot of boxes. Like, that's really the big thing. It checks a lot of boxes for me. Looks great. They use a lot of practical effects. It's just that I've never been somebody who's just there just for straightforward action. I need stuff to surround my action. This movie, for the most part, it's a straightforward action movie, just a chase movie. You go back and forth, and that's really it. I know there's a lot more to it. There's a little bit more nuance to it, but it just doesn't work for me. And Fury Road is another one of those big-time movies that people have absolutely loved. It got nominated for Best Picture. I never really liked it. I have the Blu-ray. I bought the 4K collection. And I gave it away. It didn't even work. I just could not keep it. I just really do not like those movies, and I don't keep movies that I don't like on my shelf. It kills me to say that because I know how much people love those movies. A long time ago, I would have said I don't like the Lord of the Rings movies, and then I rewatched the 4K Blu-rays, and I was like, holy shit, no, the Lord of the Rings movies are actually masterpieces. I was wrong about those. But the Mad Max movies, they just never entirely worked for me. I wish they did. I really do. It really does bother me when people love movies, and I have to go in there and be like, I just didn't like it. It didn't 100%. You know what another big one is? And I know this one will probably get the most flack from everyone. The original Avengers movie. I remember seeing that in theaters. I really loved it, mainly because it's so exciting to see all these guys on the big screen together. But then when I watched that movie at home, the way it's shot, the cinematography, it feels like a TV movie. And, other than some of the big moments in that, like when, obviously in the city when we get the wraparound shot and they're all there, that's iconic. But for the rest of the movie, I just thought it's all right. People put this on a mantle, and I guess mainly because of what it did for the superhero genre. Nobody expected this movie to ever even exist, and I can understand it for that. But if you look at the movie in a bubble, I wouldn't say it's one of the best movies ever. So, I always felt like that one was pretty overrated. So that was a great question as well. It's going to definitely get me in some trouble, but still a fantastic question. Thank you so much, buddy. Next question is from Emmanuel. He said, what's your favorite movie based on a book? Well, one of my favorite movies of all time is Goodfellas, and that's based on the 1985 book Wise Guy, which is about Henry Hill. I think it was written by Nicholas Palente, I want to say, who also wrote the screenplay for Goodfellas. So, of course, he was there. And, it's about Henry Hill and everything that would end up being the movie Goodfellas. I think Goodfellas is one of the greatest films ever made. So that would obviously be my choice for the best movie based on a book. Another one you can go with is The Shining. I think The Shining is probably one of Stanley Kubrick's best films, one of his top 2 best films. I can't necessarily say it's number 1, but still, it's a masterpiece. Of course, Stephen King, who wrote the original book, The Shining, fucking hates the movie The Shining by Stanley Kubrick, but still, you can't deny the quality of the film, and I love Stephen King. I love a lot of Stephen King film adaptations. The Shining is the best of them. I get why Stephen King wouldn't like it, but I've seen the other version that he did, or at least he approves of. It's not as good as the one that stars Jack Nicholson. I'm sorry. The Shining is a masterpiece, and it has a fantastic 4K Blu-ray. So that's, those are probably my top 2 choices. There's so many movies based on books. You can go on and on with that, but still, I'd have to say that those are my 2 favorites. That's a great question as well, Emmanuel. Thank you so much, buddy. And the next question is from Condo0073. He said, do you rate Jingle All the Way? And I think he meant to say, how do you rate Jingle All the Way? Well, I really like Jingle All the Way. Liked it a lot more when I was younger. It's not one of my favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, but for every year or every other year, I'll throw on Jingle All the Way. It's not an every year watch for me. I actually think Sinbad's the funniest part of the movie, even though I love seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. Him, Phil Hartman, it breaks my heart to see him in it. This fucking ladies, man, just going around hooking up with all the single ladies in the neighborhood, eating all their cookies. It's fantastic. Sinbad has some of my favorite, this is a homemade explosive device. And then when it finally goes off, he's like, there's some sick people in this world. Sick people. Sinbad has always been great. Very underrated comedian. I always loved it when he popped up. He's always very, very funny. He has some good chemistry with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I love seeing them, the 2 of them just sitting there, in the diner, which is, I think it's the same diner from The Big Lebowski, if I'm not wrong on that. It hits all the Christmas movie tropes, looking for the Turbo Man doll. It's just, I used to watch this movie a ton when I was a kid. I think I burnt myself out on it because now, again, it's maybe an every other year watch. I don't even have the Blu-ray for it. So I still think it's really good. It's just not one of my all-time favorite Christmas movies where I'm going to watch it every single year. Next question is from Kylie Tinkle, and she said, what movie character, if they were real, do you think could be your ride or die best friend? First one that popped in my head was Seth Rogen from Pineapple Express. That's kind of the guys I would usually hang out with. A guy who just loves to smoke weed, hang out, just chill, laugh. Like, that's the people I always end up, like, hanging out with. I, like, gravitate to. Like, people want to hang out and watch movies with me. My favorite kind of people. I'm a very laid-back, kind of chill guy. I'm not somebody who's out there gonna, like, I hate confrontation. It just seems like he'd be kind of similar. Like, he'd be like a guy we can put some movies on, watch a marathon together, and that's my kind of guy. Another one who I think would be, like, my ride or die. Just seems like a really cool guy, loyal to his friends. Axel Foley, played by Eddie Murphy in the Beverly Hills Cops movies. He stays loyal to his friends till the very end. Even, he's willing to risk his life for his friends. That's a great friend. So I'd always have to choose Axel Foley. I mean, he gave the guys the ropes. I want those ropes from the hotel. Oh, man, what a great, great guy. So that would be my two choices for who I think would be my ride or die best friends. Thank you so much, Kylie Tinkle. I appreciate that question as well. And our last question this week is from Aaron Click, and he said, what is your favorite scene from your top 10 favorite movies? If 10 is too many, feel free to make it 5 instead. Now I'm going to go with 10. So my number 10 favorite film, you guys will realize what my top 10 favorite films are right now, which, this is always changing. Maybe I'll do a top 25 list every single year just because, other than like my top 5, things can go in and out. At a number 10, I got Malcolm X from 1992, a Spike Lee joint. What is my favorite scene from Malcolm X? This is pretty tough because Malcolm X has some great scenes and, he delivers some great speeches in there. But I'd have to say my favorite scene is actually in the prison, in the shower, where Malcolm X is talking to the guy who's going to end up like kind of changing his life. How he's explaining to him like what you're doing is wrong. And this is like the key moment in his life. He's literally doing the thing with his hair again. It's starting to burn. And, he's trying to explain to him like, you're an addict. Everything can change for you. This is going to be... there's so much more you could do, or you could keep going down the same path you're going down, and you were going to be a failure. And I love that scene in the shower. It's perfect. That's my favorite scene in that movie. Number 9, Lethal Weapon. What is my favorite scene from Lethal Weapon? There's so many great ones. The one that always pops in my head, I guess you could call this an extended scene because it kind of leads into it. I don't know if you would consider this another scene, but I always think of the scene where Martin Riggs, played by Mel Gibson in this movie, goes to the top to help the guy who's about to kill himself. Now, we see in this movie, pretty before this, one of the hardest scenes to watch is when Mel Gibson has the gun in his mouth. He's so depressed about his, wife dying in a car accident. He doesn't really want to go on. The only thing that gets him up every day is the job. So anyway, he's on the roof. He's trying to talk this guy down. He's a little bit of a loose cannon, and he decides, like, all right, well, we'll just go jump together, because he's also suicidal, but they jump on the big blow-up thing, which we don't see until they land on it, and then Danny Glover drags him in the back, and he, like, starts yelling, he's like, are you suicidal? And then that's when they get the thing where, like, he's, like, about to actually kill himself, and, Danny Glover gets the back of the gun, whatever the hell they call that, it pinches his finger because he was going to actually do it. And that's when Danny Glover goes, you're not actually crazy. You are suicidal. Like, really showing you like, yeah, no, this guy's got a lot going on. That's the best scene in Lethal Weapon. And number 8, The Fugitive. It's funny. There's so many great scenes in The Fugitive. No, I know my favorite scene in this movie. 110% because this scene will actually make me cry. It's the scene where, our fugitive, played by Harrison Ford, Dr. Richard Kimball, he's in the hospital. They're chasing him. But because he's such a good doctor, despite the fact he's on the run, they think he killed his wife. He's in the hospital right now, and he sees that they've misdiagnosed this kid, and if they don't get him to surgery, he's going to die. So he fills it all out, sends him to the right place where he's going to go. But, of course, this might lead people on his trail. But the fact that he has that much of a heart, that even though he wants to prove his innocence, he's not going to allow a child to die just because, somebody's inept and they look really busy. But still, I love that moment. It actually makes me cry because it just shows you how good of a doctor and, what the world is losing because they didn't want to do their job and find the one-armed man. Love that scene in The Fugitive. Next up, RoboCop. There's so many great scenes in RoboCop. It's just a perfect film. I guess my favorite scene in this movie is in the factory where Clarence Boddicker is about to buy drugs, and this is when RoboCop breaks in and he's just destroying the place, throwing Clarence Boddicker through windows, and then he's like, "It was Dick Jones!" and the score's playing. Oh, man, it's perfect. Even before that, when Clarence Boddicker's just talking to the other guy, he dips his fingers in the wine, and the line's like, "The Tigers are playing tonight. I never miss a game." Like, I mean, my God. Kurtwood Smith was a fantastic villain in this movie. Next up, Goodfellas. I mean, there's so many great scenes in Goodfellas. I guess you got to go with the tracking shot. I love that tracking shot. Then he kissed me all the way from the streets right to the front of the Coca Cabana. It's just done so perfectly. It's one of the greatest tracking shots in film history. And then it ends with, "What do you do?" "I'm in construction." But the other scene, I quote this scene all the time, is, "Karen, how could you do that? That was all of our money. They were going to find it." Oh, my God. I love Goodfellas. Favorite scene in that. Chinatown. There's so many great scenes in Chinatown. It's hard to just pick one of them, but Oh man, what is my favorite scene? The one scene I always think of is late in the movie with John Huston and Jack Nicholson, you know, his future like father-in-law, I guess. Well, I guess did they ever fully get married? I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, you know, they're talking and the sun's setting in the background. So the background's like purple. It looks so gorgeous. And they're just talking. They're just talking about like all the information that he actually has on John Huston. The conversation is just so well done. Most of this movie is just very dialogue driven, but it's just done so well in that one scene. Next up, Paris, Texas. You know, this actually includes my favorite scene in film history, which we talked about pretty recently. I've talked about it a bunch pretty recently, but it's worth echoing again. And that's the scene with the two-way mirror where Harry Dean Stanton is talking to his former wife, you know, who left him. They haven't even seen each other since she left. She doesn't even realize that's him because it's a two-way mirror. So he's just talking to her and he's saying, like, telling the entire story of their life. And of their relationship, and she doesn't even realize it, but about halfway through she starts to connect. The tears, oh my god, just a beautiful, beautiful scene. And that scene raises the quality of that movie overall, and it's a huge reason why it's one of my favorite films ever, is that one scene alone. It builds up perfectly. Next up, 1989's Batman. My favorite scene in this movie is actually, I don't even think there's that much dialogue in it, but it's just when the Batmobile is driving through the woods, the leaves are flying everywhere, the cold winter leaves or cold fall leaves. He's in there with Vicky Vale. They're driving along. The score is perfect. Probably my favorite piece of score in this movie. And it's them just heading to the Batcave. Really not that long of a scene, but it's the best scene in the movie. Pulp Fiction, of course, you guys know. It's when Jules and Vincent show up in the apartment. Jules' best scene where he's just banging out the lines. This is a big kahuna burger, huh? That's that Hawaiian joint. And then, of course, Ezekiel 11:16 or whatever the hell it is. And he's banging that out right before he starts shooting at them. Just so well done. I mean, that scene's perfect. It's a perfect scene in film. And then The Terminator. The best scene in The Terminator, the greatest film of all time, is in the police station where Arnold, it starts with "I'll be back" and then him come crashing through that entire sequence of when he's just laying out everybody in the police station. Then Kyle has to try and get Sarah Connor out there before he finds them. And he's a killing machine, and he was right on their tail. Almost had him. And I love the very end of the scene, how before it fades to black, how he's just a machine just walking right towards them. They're getting away. He's just walking right. He doesn't care about anybody who's in there. He wants to kill Sarah Connor. That is it. So since she's gone, he's gone too. And that is by far the best scene in The Terminator. That was a great question as well. Thank you so much, buddy. I really do appreciate that. And guys, that's going to do it here for us on another episode of the Let's Talk Q&A show. I hope you guys enjoyed this show. And if you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave your questions for next week in the comment section below. Or you can wait till the post that I'm going to actually put out on Mondays now instead of Tuesdays. Give you guys a little bit more time because I do film the show usually on Wednesdays. I won't be doing that next week because it's Christmas, so it'll actually be filmed on Thursday. But, you know, I really appreciate you guys sending in all these questions. They're all great. Thank you guys all so much. I really, really do appreciate it. And guys, if you want to become a channel member, maybe become a friend of the channel and producer for the channel, like John Doe Juggalo and Jet Eckert, you can do that. You can even become a channel director like Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews and Mr. Smelly Potato. You can look for all that information in the description below. But if you got no money to throw away, guys, don't worry about it at all. All we hope is that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.